Hi, I'm John Green. This is Crash Course World History, and today we're going to talk about something we haven't discussed much here at Crash Course: peace. Peaceful, nonviolent protest.
Mr. Green, finally an episode where no one gets killed.
Some people are going to get killed in the past. Sadly, peaceful, nonviolent protest is often just peaceful on the one side. So we've talked a lot about war this year on Crash Course, how it shapes civilizations and nation states, and it's easy to assume that humans are kind of naturally violent and prone to fighting. And in recent human history, especially during the 20th century, we got scarily good at waging war, right? There were, of course, the two world wars, but there were also many other very destructive, smaller wars, and we can't forget that there were also genocides. But one of the most remarkable and often unnoticed aspects of the 20th century is the incredible number of peace, nonviolence, and anti-war movements. Like we know about Gandhi, but what makes the 20th century unique in history is that Gandhi wasn't unique. There was actually a surprisingly large number of peace and nonviolence movements that were occurring all around the world. So in this...
Okay, hi everyone. So let me, before I forget, go to smart attendance, and your number is 593. And so let me go to chatting, and 593 is your number, and send that to everybody. Okay. So today we have Sally is engaging in the debate, and let me open up any other additional materials I wanted to show you here. Let me open up the lesson plan, and the lesson plan for today is, this is debate topic on to South Koreans: if the United States recognizes Taiwan as a sovereign country, then South Korea will do so as well, despite the economic cost to South Korean trade with China. Okay, so maybe we should open up the notes and talk a little bit more about those a little bit more directly, and where we stopped at the last class was towards the beginning of the notes, and so models of political economy. And so make sure that I'm sharing the screen so you can see that. And we go here, and so models of political economy. The government monitors and regulates the economy, and the politics of economic development and economic regulation is called political economy. And regulating commerce is inherently a political process. So this is an important point to make, because the Americans, in terms of American political culture, the Americans, for example, tend to assume, not everybody, but the prevailing view in the United States, that somehow free market economics is natural, that it's a natural predisposition for human beings to engage in free market economics. Because in liberalism, as articulated, for example, by individuals like John Locke, there is a more benign, positive view about human nature having good cooperative predispositions than the realists represented by Hans Morgenthau that we've talked about at the beginning of the semester tend to articulate. Realists tend to assume that human nature is basically pretty dark. And these include people like Machiavelli, and theorists like Machiavelli and Thomas Hobbes. They tend to assume that if human beings are not regulated or controlled, they tend to engage in exploitation and vicious exploitation of each other. But the Americans tend to view their political culture as inherited from a rising middle class in the industrializing country of Great Britain that wanted basically this middle class, for the aristocrats, the traditional ruling houses of Britain, and the aristocracy, the Yangban, not to interfere in their internal affairs by using their claims of feudal ancient privileges to dominate and control the rising middle class that was generating economic wealth. And so the Americans, my point is, the Americans tend to view basically free market economics is somehow naturally emerging. And the problem is that you have corrupt, authoritarian, bureaucratic interests represented by the state that can interfere in the natural economic processes that will emerge if you leave them alone. And so you do need a state in the American traditional political cultural view of classical liberalism, often called American exceptionalism, only because you need to have you need a police force to arrest criminals and put them on trial in courts and have jails for them. So the view of the state is a state that's only in the background, looking to maintain security and protect property and enforce contracts, economic contracts. And those of you who go further in political science are going to learn about political theory and contract theory in terms of why citizens should obey and how they learn to obey the authorities on the basis of a contract, that we will obey the authorities in return for the authorities protecting our human rights. And if the authorities threaten our human rights, including the right to property, then we have the right to rebel and overthrow the authorities. So, but in fact, creating an effective, non-corrupt economy requires a strong state. You need a strong state to create a viable, strong economy. And we have seen that in the last 30 years, for example, with the breakup of the Soviet Union. Natural economic growth and development in Russia through free market economics did not really emerge in Russia, because Russia has terrible corruption problems, because it's got a corrupt, ineffective state. And as a consequence, it faces strong economic problems because it's not able to enforce what liberals call the rule of law, because the authorities are themselves mafiosi, basically, or are overly controlled by organized crime figures. So the point is that regulating commerce is inherently a political process, even if actors like the United States don't really fully recognize that as much, say, as Europeans or Asians, where we have a stronger corporatist orientation, where, of course, in Europe, of course, in Korea, of course, in Japan, of course, in China, the state should play a leading role in organizing and developing the economy. That's accepted in Europe and Asia, less so in America. But it's becoming more obvious to Americans as they confront the challenges of interdependency and economic aspects of national security require state involvement in, for example, negotiating trade deals, with other actors, international actors, dealing with climate change, and regulating financial flows. For example, in 2008, during the start of the great financial crisis, the Great Recession, the world was on the brink of another Great Depression, but we saw the US, China, Korea, Japan, Europe, Britain all come together to coordinate, collaborate, and cooperate in their financial policies to save the financial system, the world financial system, from breaking down to go into another Great Depression like we had in the 1930s. And that is, in a sense, impressive, because it shows that there is some capacity, there is a strong capacity for learning. They didn't make the same mistakes that they made in 1929, 1930. And they successfully collaborated, coordinated, and cooperated to prevent the recession from becoming much worse, which it could have been much worse than it was. And so we also see that they're cooperating, coordinating, collaborating to deal with the pandemic and its economic consequences, and also now to regulate global commerce in terms of now, for example, the agreement among the OECD countries to put on a common base corporate taxation rate of 15% of all corporations anywhere, so corporations cannot move from country to country looking for new headquarters in order to find a cheaper interest rate, a cheaper taxation rate that will allow them to keep more of their profits. So this is the international political economy. And this involves lots of different actors who are interest groups, corporations, as well as foreign governments and intergovernmental organizations that work together and that cooperate and coordinate and collaborate and compete to create what we call the world economy. And again, this is an important point to keep in mind. Even if you want to have neoliberal free market economics, you need a strong state to carry out those policies. So in the 1970s and 80s, under Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher in Britain and Ronald Reagan in the United States, you saw a big rise in the power of the central government to deregulate the economy. Deregulating or changing policies requires political capabilities, political efficacy, political support. And typically you find that, for example, in the British and the American case, part of that source of political support was nationalism, was appealing to American nationalism to make the American or British economies strong by breaking up the welfare state, reducing taxation, reducing social protections, reducing social justice policy obligations in order to have a more flexibility in capital flows and causing economic dislocations and suffering for those sections of the economy that are going to lose from those changes. So, and that typically means old sunset industries, manufacturing industries, mining industries, like, for example, coal. I mean, we all know we need to move away from coal. So a lot of coal miners are going to lose their job around the whole world. What are you going to do with those people? How are you going to deal with their political resistance? Are you going to use the police to put them in jail if they protest? Or are you going to come up with some other effective political way by which to accommodate and respond to these inevitable changes that are necessary, either in a liberal format or a socialist format, or through an economic nationalist format that involves using the power of the state to reconstruct the economy. And governments typically exploit all elements from all three models in managing their economic affairs. And even the United States, which likes to believe in the natural existence of the free market, they accept that the US government can intervene in the market for national security purposes. So since World War II, or even before, during World War II, the United States developed a tremendous, for example, aerospace industry. Boeing emerged as a great economic actor in the United States during World War II, as it was building the bombers and fighter jets that were fighter planes during the war, and that continued after the Cold War, so that the United States Boeing company came to dominate the world aerospace industry because of basically the need of the US government to have a strong, stable, effective corporate business manufacturing capacity to supply the US military to contain the Soviet Union. So many of American technologies emerged within the context of this national security state and the national security objectives of the United States. Like, for example, the semiconductor, the foundation of modern computers, for example, was developed as a result of collaboration with the US Defense Department. And this continues in different artificial intelligence and other digital economy companies are funded and supported by the US Defense Department, the CIA, because it's all viewed as necessary for maintaining America's national technological advances and advantages over America's adversaries like China and Russia. And you see it being said even today that, for example, well, what do we see here now? Let's do an exercise. So let me open up a news report that just emerged today, I think yesterday, in the New York Times, that illustrates this. So here you see this statement. So I'm going to ask you, in relationship to today's debate, here's a statement. South Korea and Taiwan are preparing to end their dependence on China's export markets for the long-term economic prosperity. So do you agree or disagree with that statement? And the reason I'm asking this is because this is from yesterday in the business section, the B business section of the New York Times. So Taylor is a town in Texas. Guess what? Samsung will build a $17 billion semiconductor factory in Taylor, Texas. It said on Tuesday, giving a big boost to a bipartisan effort, Republican and Democratic effort in Washington to persuade semiconductor chip makers that make the computer chips that fund everything from our smartphones to our laptops to everything, to build more of the components in the United States. So the United States gets, I think, a majority of its computer semiconductors for its cars, its laptops, its smartphones, for everything that has a computer chip in it, from Taiwan and South Korea, from Samsung and Taiwan manufacturers. The company, Samsung's decision came after months of deliberation over possible locations in the United States and South Korea. The company, one of the world's largest makers of computer chips, considered a site in Austin, Texas, which is about 40 minutes from Taylor, as well as locations in Arizona and New York. So as Washington has urged chip makers to build more in the United States, cities have raced to get a piece of the potential boom. Taylor, Texas, went to great lengths to lure the Samsung plant. The city, its independent school district, and the surrounding county promised the company hundreds of millions of dollars in tax breaks to Samsung. So Samsung builds this factory in Taylor, this huge factory, $17 billion factory. I mean, that's a big factory. that Samsung will not have to pay local income taxes for some period of years on that property. Will not have to pay property taxes, real estate taxes, in return for building that factory in Taylor and producing lots of jobs and so on. Semiconductor plants require abundant water and reliable power, so they reached a deal to transport water from adjacent county for the facility. Samsung's decisions comes up during a major shortage of semiconductors. So, you know, there's a shortage of semiconductors around the world today. One of the reasons we have inflation is because there's all this competition for semiconductors, along with other elements in global production change as a result of the disruptions from the pandemic, shutting down factories at different places at different times to deal with the COVID-19 coronavirus spread that has disrupted the global capitalist production change, including in semiconductors. So, for example, American and other car companies cannot sell enough, don't have enough cars to sell. People want to buy these cars, but they can't find the cars because the cars don't have the semiconductors in them to complete the cars. The companies do not have enough semiconductors, so they're not able to sell as many cars as they would like to sell because they don't have them, because they don't have the semiconductors to finish them. Samsung's decision comes during a major shortage of semiconductors, which are critical to products as diverse as F-150s, that's a Ford pickup truck, medical devices, and iPhones. Lawmakers and the Biden administration have grown concerned that not enough of the vital components are made in America. And here's the point. China has invested heavily in incentivizing production of computer chips inside its borders. So the Chinese government has encouraged, through its use of subsidies and influence over Chinese state-owned banks, to encourage the emergence, development, and growth of Chinese companies to build semiconductors in China to supply Chinese companies with semiconductors. And Taiwan and South Korea both produce a major share of the semiconductors. Policymakers worry that that leaves the United States at an economic and national security disadvantage. So in the last few years, since the Trump administration, beginning before the pandemic, there was all this concern about the United States now being too dependent upon external sources for vital products like semiconductors that you need in everything. Tanks, fighter jets, iPhones, cars, computers. And so the United States is encouraging and wants to develop more industry inside the United States to supply American companies instead of being reliant upon China. China. That's the main concern. Of course, we know lots of these semiconductors come from South Korea and Taiwan, but if there is a conflict with China, China might be able to disrupt Taiwan or South Korea's supply. Right? So the United States wants Taiwan and South Korea to continue to supply American companies with semiconductors, but also to build those factories in the United States. The plant in Taylor will be the latest to be built in America in recent years. Intel, that's an American company that also makes semiconductors, that has fallen behind the Taiwanese and the South Korean companies to build. They used to be the leader in semiconductor technology. Now they've fallen behind Samsung and the Taiwan. It's called the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, and that is also building a new plant in Arizona. Intel, the American company, is building a semiconductor plant in Arizona. The Taiwan company is building a new plant in Arizona. So this whole discussion is happening because of the increasing conflict with China. And so this relates to the question, do you think that basically if the United States gets into a more intense conflict with Taiwan and basically comes to recognize Taiwan, if Taiwan, for example, were to declare independence and trigger the Americans and push the Americans to make a decision whether or not to defend Taiwan, let's say in 2 or 3 years, let's say if Donald Trump becomes president again, or a Republican like Donald Trump becomes president again, it's more likely that the United States will support Taiwan. What will South Korea do when the Americans pressure South Korea to follow the lead of their American ally? When, as we pointed out before, South Korea's trade today with China is more than South Korea's trade with US and Japan combined. South Korean trade with China is more than its trade with Japan and the United States together. So please respond to the following statement. Or do you think that basically South Korea and Taiwan are preparing to end their dependence on China's export markets for their long-term economic prosperity? They're preparing by increasing their ties with the United States and the American-led Western group of countries, including Europe, European Union, and Japan. So can you please, let's see, break you up into breakout rooms and let me see. So we have how many people here? 10. So let's break up into 3 groups and assign you automatically. So there you are. Please join the groups. And who's going to speak for the group? Heads, it's the first person in the group. And it's tails. Head, it's the bottom person in the group. And it's heads. So please join the group. Chon Hyo-kyung will speak for room 1. Timen will speak for room 2. And Kim Eugene will speak for room 3. Please join your groups. So Chon Hyo-kyung, Timen, and Kim Eugene will speak. And we have a debate today, so we have to make sure we leave enough time for that. So, so what am I going to write a statement? What's my statement going to be? So let me go back to the share screen and flip a coin. And heads, I'm 1, 2, or 3. And it is heads. So heads, I'm a 1. And it's heads again. So I strongly agree. I will write a strongly agree statement. Okay. Okay, so who's going to speak first? Heads, it's room one, and it is heads. So Chun Hyo Kyung, what did your group, where do you place your group on this scale?
We have two opinions, disagree and agree, and it was majority of times so I could not understand what the agree opinion was. But about the disagree opinion, it is a very high. South Koreans are high dependent on China's relations. So if we add if we end our dependence on China's export markets, then we will have high risk. Yeah. And
Yeah.
for agree opinion, it was something like we can have another trade tracks with another countries. So yeah.
Yeah, I flipped a coin and I was assigned strongly agree. So since I was assigned strongly agree on the statement, let me read what I wrote. Strongly agree. Taiwan and South Korea as states are dependent for their existence on their alliance with the United States. Preserving their alliance with the United States is always the overriding high-level tactical aim of their foreign policies. They are therefore preparing for a US-led break with China ahead of time. Today, in the future, there will be this break by shifting their international production and trade commitments to the United States. They will not sacrifice their close alliance with the US for any amount of economic interest involving China. So in other words, in a future scenario in which, let us say, Taiwan announces it is a sovereign independent state. China says if Taiwan ever announces that it's a sovereign independent state, China will use force against Taiwan. Imagine that happens in Taiwan. Let's say this happens in 2 years, 3 years from now. A Republican is president of the United States after Joe Biden loses or doesn't run because he's too old. A Republican is now president. Taiwan makes that announcement. You can bet that the US government will support Taiwan. And they will expect Japan and South Korea to support Taiwan as well. So what's South Korea and Taiwan going to do? Are they going to say, no, America, we're not going to recognize we're not going to recognize Taiwan. We're not going to support Taiwan. No, no. You think they'll really do that? Even though they know that China will, do you think they really will reject America's demand that they support Taiwan's independence if America supports Taiwan's independence? Maybe. I mean, Japan is already offering aid and assistance to Taiwan. I mean, maybe this is all intended to have good relations with the US, but Japan is talking about aiding Taiwan, even making vague statements about sending naval forces to visit Taiwan. Do you really think that South Korea will tell the Americans to go away? I don't know, but I find it hard to believe. Even though, as we said, of course, now if China were to break economic ties with South Korea, it'd be very costly to China as well. China would have to break relations with everybody in this situation, with the European Union, with Japan. So it'll be tremendously costly to China, tremendously painful for China as well. So maybe China won't break relations. But it is a one-party communist authoritarian dictatorship that can impose costs on its people, make them tolerate the costs. But I mean, it would be a high cost for China, not to mention for South Korea and Japan and everybody else dependent upon China, but also for the Chinese economy as well. And I'm getting a sense that the Taiwan lobby is really making a major push in the United States for the United States to support Taiwan independence. I'm getting this from all sorts of sources, that there's some kind of major push underway now in the United States to establish Taiwan as a sovereign independent state before China becomes strong enough to be able to stand alone. Because of course, China still depends upon its exports for its prosperity. Xi Jinping wants to develop China's independent economy, internal market through consumers, but it's going to take a while to do that. So they will not be so dependent upon exports, but that's going to take some time, years. Okay, but we need to go to the other groups. So let's hear now what heads is 2, and it is 3. So Kim Eugene, what did your group come up with?
So we are neutral and cannot decide because since South Korea and Taiwan has already have high dependency on trade with China, so there's some risks, and also it's good to be independent. But however, since China is a big market, as I said before, it has some risk.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, this is all a matter of taking time, making preparations. So this is going to take some time. You know, the U.S. wants to rely upon South Korea and Taiwan for imports if it has to rely upon imports. But again, if there's a conflict with China, China can disrupt those. Can make, you know, can disrupt those sources if those sources of semiconductors are located in South Korea and Taiwan. So, so it seems like Taiwan and South Korea are aiming also to shift their production facilities and make money in the United States by building in the United States and making money in the United States, because those production facilities, if there is a conflict with China, will be protected because they're in the United States, right? Okay, and the third group, is
Yes.
okay. Timan.
Yes. Well, we did actually not agree on this statement. We were thinking about it, and our opinion was that they were more shooting themselves in their own foot if they actually do end economical dependence. China's very important and crucial thing, and we agree that, well, China is in their crucial phase, but it's still, we still think that for South Korea and Taiwan, the right thing is still to keep their economical dependence, because look at so much other Asian countries who are still also economically dependent on China, and for example Taiwan, well, and are not political dependent by China. Look at Indonesia or other Asian countries.
I talked with one person before the pandemic who told me that from Vietnam that Samsung said it's moving all of its production facilities out of China. It's shifting all of its production, its foreign production in China to Vietnam. That was 3 years ago. So, you know, I don't know if that's true. That's what, she was a professor at some Japanese funded university in Vietnam. You know, I told you the United States, Japan, all these countries are big countries are trying to finance universities. She was a Vietnamese professor. And so, I mean, again, but this highlights the fact that basically, you know, the dollar follows the flag. The flag does not follow the dollar. Economics is subservient to the political interests of nation states, whether it be America, China, Vietnam, Japan, and markets and economics requires and is influenced by politics and the state. Okay, but we have to go to our debate, so let me then ask you to vote on this. So we go back to the cyber campus, and the vote is, so please vote on this question, and we'll do that for 15 seconds. Okay. Okay, all right, so that's where we'll finish this. Let's go to our debate now. And our debate is, again, I'm on the debate with as pro, so I'll start off on that. And so again, I've already pretty much set the framework for my pro statement, but I will start, and I will not speak too long because we want to have more time for con. So let me set up my my clock here and reiterate some points that I made that I just repeat already here, that Taiwan and South Korea exist because of America's commitment to making them exist. And so this is an issue of survival for well, let me just say, Sally, if you've got a PowerPoint presentation or something you want to show the class, please get it open and ready to go so that when it's your turn to speak, you can share the screen. So let me make the share screen available option in case you want to use it. And so I've made a share screen option available. So Sally, please go ahead and get yourself ready to make your con statement. But just to repeat what I said earlier, I mean, I think that this is what I would really say, that Taiwan and South Korea exist because of America's security guarantees to them. And so these countries, I think, and these authorities understand that. And so if there's going to be an inevitable escalation of conflict between US and China, that's going to affect the trade between them. And South Korea has already experienced that, as I said, with regard, for example, to the THAAD, the Theater High Altitude, I can't remember what THAAD stands for. I guess I can try to find it here on Wikipedia. You know, THAAD is this radar system that the US wanted to set up in South Korea to help shoot down any missiles sent by the North Korea. Yes, here it is, right? This is the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense. And the Americans wanted to establish this capability in South Korea because they need to have radars in South Korea. And China threatened South Korea and told South Korea that it would punish South Korea if it allowed the Americans to establish this Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System in Korea because it would be used to spy on China and monitor China. And the South Koreans went ahead and did it anyway. And the Chinese put sanctions on them. And those sanctions have slowly been lifted by China. But we already saw that if you force South Korea to choose between China and the United States, it will choose the United States. It will choose the United States. It has to choose the United States. The same is true of Taiwan. And so if it's inevitable there will be a conflict, an escalating, intensifying conflict between US and China, of course, South Korea and Taiwan are going to prepare for that. And they're going to shift more and more of their production away from China to American allies, if not to the United States itself. And as we saw, Samsung in Taiwan, the Taiwan company, are now building factories in the US. So I think, I don't need to repeat what I said already about these points because I've made them earlier. So now I'll go to Khan and let Sally make her opening statement.
Okay.
And you can turn on your camera too.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. A few days ago, as you know, Biden, the United States president, invited Taiwan to the Summit for Democracy. The decision that invitation Taiwan to Summit for Democracy came less than 10 days after President Joe Biden expressed support for the One China policy at a video summit with China President Xi Jinping on the 16th. China strongly protested and gave a warning about that. China has a very intense and sensitive position of independence of Taiwan, and not only Taiwan, but also Tibet and Uyghur and so on. Anyway, in my opinion, even if the United States recognizes Taiwan as a sovereign country, then South Korea will not do so as well. There are many reasons why South Korea would not recognize Taiwan as a sovereign country. First, first, the biggest reason is the economic problem. South Korea has a high level of dependence upon China, and the import of raw materials such as rare earth elements, which are issues these days, and the manufacturing industry that uses and processes them will be hit hard. It also gives a negative effect on the semiconductor industry. Trade policy is a national security policy because trade constitutes most of the international relations. So for Korea, the relationship with China is very important. So yeah, Korea will not announce that Taiwan is an independent country officially. Second, a geopolitical relationship. South Korea is close to China, but one of the allies of the United States. Korea is an embarrassing position between them. So it's very complicated problem, I think. So as a view of neighborhood country, China is sensitive, as I mentioned earlier, because of the territorial disputes with Taiwan, Tibet, Uyghur, and so on. So China imposes strong sanctions on each counterparties that mentioned about minor ethnic groups. So, and the Republic of Korea was hit hard by China just because, for example, Korea was hit hard by China just because train when deploying THAAD. We call that, but yeah, Terminal High Altitude Area Defense. Therefore, South Korea should adopt a policy carefully. And next, as a view of ally of the US, considering the possibility of the pressure for Korea by the US, as an ally of South Korea, the United States will not pressure South Korea to officially announce Taiwan as an independent country. This is because the US can also expect South Korea to be hit economically by China. So Korea will make a practical policy and announcement for promotion the national interest. Yeah, I'm done.
Okay, I will respond by saying that it's not just a matter of, the United States recognizing Taiwan. I can imagine a scenario in which the Taiwan government announces its sovereign independence during a crisis. For example, let us say, for example, there is a crisis that escalates between U.S. and China over an island. Let's say accidents happen. These military bureaucracies and other national security bureaucracies involve thousands and thousands of people. And I can imagine some kind of conflict emerging or happening that causes a crisis between the United States and China. And then Taiwan exploits that situation to declare its independence. Is the Americans? I mean, I'm not saying Taiwan is going to do that today, but I can imagine that Taiwan will see an opportunity emerging to get a final American commitment to Taiwan's sovereign independence by exploiting increasing conflict between U.S. and China, particularly while claiming that China is an authoritarian communist state where the United States must protect Taiwan as a vibrant democracy that is under threat from an authoritarian dictatorship that is aggressively motivated and has desires to establish its hegemony in Asia and the world. And China building those islands in the South China Sea, they will point to that as evidence that China is trying to expand its hegemony, and you can see countries bending to Chinese will, including in Philippines and in Indonesia, as they're shifting more and more of their economic behavior and accommodating Chinese demands. And Taiwan will, I can imagine a scenario where Taiwan would exploit that situation to make a major move to encourage other countries. You already see it. There's already countries open, receptive to that. Lithuania and the European Union is now recognizing Taiwan as the Republic of Taiwan. And Lithuania and European Union would not do that if it didn't think it had support or could carry this out without adequate support from the European Union, NATO, as one of the newest member states of the European Union. And then so you can imagine a situation where there's a crisis, and then the United States is going to defend Taiwan. They're not going to let Taiwan be absorbed into the one-party dictatorship of China. And then the Americans will expect their friends, their allies, to show that they're allies, to support Taiwan. And so what is South Korea going to do? Is South Korea going to say no? It's already probably too late at that point. The fact is that there's still 30,000 soldiers still in South Korea. So even if Taiwan, even if the South Korea refuses to recognize or support Taiwan, China will still see that South Korea, or at least perceive South Korea, is still supporting the United States. Even if not officially, not openly, they're still supporting the United States, making it easier for the United States to carry out its hegemony in Asia, to support and defend Taiwan by using American military bases in South Korea and Japan. So even if South Korea doesn't want to make a public statement in support of Taiwan's independence, it still will be expected, it still will be punished as if it is part of America's power capacity in Asia to enforce America's wishes and will and hegemony over Taiwan. And I don't see how the South Koreans can avoid being punished. And then if they don't come out in support of the United States, the Americans, they'll suffer even more consequences, because the Americans say, well, the South Koreans don't show enough gratitude for American alliance and support. Donald Trump was demanding that South Korea increasing its payments to the United States for its military bases 5 times from what they pay now. So there's already that sensitivity that they expect South Korea to show that it's a firm American ally in any kind of conflict with China. Okay, and so Khan, you'll make your second statement. What is your rebuttal conclusion, Khan?
I think the Biden administration pushed it ahead with the invitation to Taiwan because China's interference is growing in Taiwan's recent move to expand its diplomatic path. China has lowered diplomatic relations between the two countries from ambassador level to proxy level after Lithuania allowed the opening of an embassy like Taiwan representative and is signaling economic retaliation. So I think, yeah, Korea will not recognize Taiwan as a sovereign country.
I don't know. I find it, I don't know. If Japan's willing to do it, I find it hard to believe that South Korea won't do it. And Japan is China is Japan's biggest trade partner. It's not the United States. China is Japan's biggest trade partner. And I just cannot believe that the Japanese will refuse to support Taiwan if the Americans make a demand in Japan that they support Taiwan the way the Americans are. And I'm not saying Japan's going to do it before the US, but if the US does it in various scenarios in the future, or maybe under a future Republican administration, that Japan is going to refuse. And if Japan's not going to refuse, it's hard for me to believe that the South Koreans will refuse. Even though there'll be a high economic cost. Of course, I mean, then we'll see these corporatist attitudes become more important, whereby, wartime, Cold War type economic policies will be implemented to further integrate the South Korean, Japanese, and American economies with the Taiwan economy, with the European economy, in which, and then Vietnam, and China has all sorts of adversaries that would want better relations with South Korea, and the South Koreans would work, like India, for example. I mean, South Korea will be committed to increasing economic and trade ties with India, another democracy. Australia, the Quad, right? India, Australia, Japan, United States, to compensate for distancing itself from China. Okay, so that's the end of my rebuttal and my concluding statement. So let me ask you then to vote on, and we go back to the share screen, and okay, so we go back to vote. And so This is anonymous. Who won the debate? Please vote. Oh, it looks like I won. You know, that typically doesn't happen. I just had a debate last class and I lost, even though I thought I did a good job. But anyway, okay. And let me go back to grading the debate. So please grade the debate as well. 15 seconds. Okay, that's it for today. And I will be in communication with you over the weekend, okay? Bye.